The biggest problem in my last video about this case was not a lie. It was not a missing record. It was not a hidden bank account. It was height. The man on Nancy Guthrie's porch, the man caught on the doorbell camera in the dark, was described by the FBI as about 5'9" to 5'10". Average build, not very tall, not very short. Tommaso Cioni is taller than that, and if the man on the porch is not Tomaso, then my whole theory from the last video falls apart. I read every comment. Now here I think I found the missing piece, and it's shocking. But before we talk about that name, we need to go back to the night everything changed. January 31st. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had lived in the same Tucson home since 1985. That house had dessert plants in the yard, a security gate in front of the door, and neighbors who had lived there for years. At around 9:30 to 9:50 that night, her son-in-law, Tomaso, dropped her off at home. He says he watched her go inside. He says she was safe. 4 hours later, someone walked up to her front door in the dark. The doorbell camera caught him. He was wearing a mask. He had gloves. He carried a black Ozark Trail backpack. He had what looked like a belly band holster around his waist. He reached toward the camera. He touched it. Then he went inside. Nancy Guthrie has not been seen since. No body. No ransom proof, and no confirmed sighting, just silence. And the silence is what makes this case feel heavy, because when someone disappears like this, there are only two possibilities. Either it was random, or it was planned. Sheriff Nanos said he believes Nancy was targeted, not random, targeted. And when a crime is targeted, someone had to choose her. Someone had to know her. Someone had to know her routine. Someone had to know when she would be alone. That brings us back to the problem. And if Tomaso is too tall to be the man on the porch, then maybe he was not the man on the porch. Maybe he did not need to be. Maybe there were two people, an architect and an operative. Let me explain this in a simple way. Imagine someone wants to build a house. One person draws the plans. That is the architect. Another person swings the hammer. That is the builder. Both are part of the house, but only one is seen holding the hammer. In my last video, I suggested Tomaso may have been the architect, the one who knew the house, the one who knew the cameras, the one who knew Nancy's schedule. But if he did not swing the hammer that night, then someone else did. Someone the right height. Someone who knew how to enter a home in the dark. Someone who was not afraid to confront an elderly woman. Someone who had done something like this before. That is where the missing piece comes in. His name is Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. But now, before you think I am accusing him, listen carefully. No law enforcement agency has named Dominic Evans as a suspect. The FBI has not arrested him. The sheriff has not charged him. Everything I am about to say is based on public records and facts anyone can look up. This is not a trial. This is a question. Who is Dominic Evans? To understand that, we need to go back almost 20 years. Back to 2007. Tucson, Arizona. Craigslist ads. Three men who did not know each other answered music postings. One played drums, one played guitar, one played bass and sang. That band was called Early Black. Dominic played drums. Tomaso played bass and sang. They practiced together. They recorded together. They played small shows in Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff. They did not become famous. but they became close. For 19 years. 19 years is not just a casual friendship. That is birthdays, holidays, long drives to shows, late-night talks after rehearsals. That is knowing someone's problems, knowing their money struggles, knowing their family. And during all 19 of those years, Tomaso was married to Nancy Guthrie's daughter. That means Dominic would have known about the family. He would have heard about Savannah. He would have heard about Nancy. Not because he was spying, but because that is what friends do. They talk about life. And when a crime may involve trust, long friendships matter. Now let us talk about something harder. Dominic Evans has a criminal record in Pima County, Arizona. Public records show felony charges that include burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, and DUI. Again, this is public record. And I want you to think about what those words mean in plain language. Burglary means entering a place you are not allowed to enter with the intent to commit a crime, not shoplifting. Entering a structure, a home. Robbery is different from simple theft. Robbery means taking something by force or threat. It means confronting a person, standing in front of them, overpowering them. It takes a certain mindset to do that. Most people never cross that line. If someone entered Nancy's home in the middle of the night, confronted her, and removed her, that required crossing that line. The doorbell footage shows someone who was not panicking. He moved calmly. He approached with purpose, and he touched the camera like he understood what it was. He wore gloves. That does not look like a random drunk man. That looks like someone who planned something. Now, does a past conviction mean someone will commit another crime? No. People can change. People can rebuild their lives. That is true. But when you are building a theory about skill sets, history matters. And if you are asking, who in Tommaso's inner circle would know how to enter a home quietly? Who would not freeze when facing another person in the dark? Who would understand how to move without drawing attention? You look at experience. And burglary teaches experience. Robbery teaches experience. You do not forget those lessons. They stay in your body. Like a drummer never forgets a rhythm. And remember the height. The FBI said 5'9" to 5'10". Dominic Evans fits within that range. Average build. Facial hair. Some online users even noticed what may be a wrist tattoo in old band footage. But I am not going to say a tattoo proves anything. Low-quality footage is tricky. Lighting can fool you. Angles can fool you. Masks can hide details. So we do not rely on faces alone. We look at patterns. We look at relationships. We look at proximity. Dominic has lived in the Tucson area for years. Nancy lived in the Catalina foothills. Tomaso and Annie lived about 4 miles from Nancy. If you draw those locations on a map, they form a tight triangle in northern Tucson. Close. Convenient. If someone wanted to plan something that required knowing the neighborhood, driving the roads at night, and leaving quickly, living inside that triangle helps. But geography is not the strongest part of this story. The strongest part is what investigators found after Nancy disappeared. 2 DNA profiles, 2 different unknown males. One DNA sample came from a glove found about 2 miles from Nancy's home. The glove appears to match what the porch suspect wore. The DNA on that glove does not match Nancy. It does not match family members. It does not match anyone in the FBI's national database. The second DNA profile came from biological evidence inside Nancy's home, and the sheriff confirmed something very important. The DNA inside the home does not match the DNA on the glove. 2 profiles. 2 different people. That means at least 2 individuals left genetic material connected to this crime. Not 1, 2. Now stop for a moment. If there were 2 people, then the height problem is not a problem anymore. One could be taller. One could be shorter. One could plan. One could execute. The architect and the operative. But how would 2 people pull this off? Think about Nancy. She was 84. She had a pacemaker, limited mobility. She cannot be rushed down a driveway. She cannot be thrown into a car quickly without risk. It would take time. Time where someone must watch. Time where someone must make sure no neighbor turns on a light. No car drives by. No dog starts barking in the wrong direction. The person inside the house cannot also be outside watching the street. That suggests coordination. And coordination suggests trust. Trust that usually comes from long relationships. Now let us return to January 23rd, 8 days before Nancy disappeared. There was another strange event. A man walked backward near her home. He was caught on a camera. He did not look like he belonged there. Some believe this was a rehearsal, a dry run, testing cameras, testing response time. If 2 people were involved, it is possible both were present that night. Maybe one walked. Maybe the other sat in a car, watching, timing, counting. Here is something important. If February 1st was the real crime night, suspects could prepare. No, they could leave phones at home. They could borrow cars. They could create an alibi. But January 23rd, that night was supposed to be invisible. No one was supposed to notice. So if 2 phones were near Nancy's house on January 23rd, and those same 2 phones were near her house on February 1st, cell tower data could reveal that pattern. Phones connect to towers automatically. They leave digital footprints, even if you do nothing. And investigators can compare those footprints. What if 2 devices traveled the same routes on both nights? That is powerful. Very powerful. And then there are the ransom-style emails sent to media outlets. One message used the phrase, "the main individual," not "the kidnapper," not "the man," "the main individual." That wording sounds like there are roles. Layers. Like the writer knows there is more than one person involved. One expert said the writer sounds close to the flame, meaning close to the crime. Close enough to know details, not close enough to feel safe. If there is a circle of people who know what happened, that circle can break, especially when the reward is now $200,000. Money tests loyalty. It tests friendships. It tests 19-year bonds. Because when DNA results come back, and genealogy testing begins, and family trees get built from distant cousins who used ancestry websites, silence becomes harder to keep. And here is where we pause. Because the next part of this story is about what happens when pressure builds. When 2 men who have known each other for 19 years both go silent. When the investigation shifts into its most critical phase. When the DNA clock starts ticking. And when one missing piece can either hold the entire framework together or shatter it completely. But before we move forward, we need to take a closer look at something small. Something simple. The front gate at Nancy's house. The front gate at Nancy's house. It seems like a small detail, but sometimes the smallest details are the loudest ones. In Tucson, many homes have two doors. There is the main front door, and in front of that, there is a metal security gate, a second barrier, a second layer. Nancy's home had one. Now think about the footage again. The man walks up to the door. He does not struggle. He does not kick. He does not pry. He does not use tools. And he reaches out and taps the camera. Then he appears to move forward. There is no clear moment where he forces his way through a locked gate. So we have two simple possibilities. 1. Nancy forgot to lock the gate. She was 84. She had lived there for decades. It was a quiet neighborhood. Maybe she felt safe. Maybe she did not think someone would come in the middle of the night. That is possible. But there is a second possibility. Someone left the gate accessible to someone who had been there earlier that night. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who knew that without the gate open, the plan would fail. Tomaso dropped Nancy off around 9:30 or 9:50 p.m. He says he watched her go inside. He says he confirmed she was safe. But did he check the outer gate after he left? Did he make sure it clicked shut? Or was it left in a position that would allow someone to walk straight through hours later? Again, this is not an accusation. It is a question. Because the man on the porch did not behave like someone overcoming obstacles. He behaved like someone following a path that had already been cleared. And if a path was cleared, that suggests coordination. Now, let us step back and look at the bigger picture. 2 DNA profiles, 2 possible individuals. A potential rehearsal on January 23rd, a targeted victim, a calm entry, a quiet removal, no vehicle identified, no neighbor reports of screaming, no confirmed sighting after. And this does not look like chaos. It looks controlled. And control often requires planning, and planning often requires communication. So if 2 people were involved, how would they communicate? Phones, text messages, calls. But smart criminals know phones leave traces. So maybe they talked in person. Maybe they used apps. Maybe they left phones at home. But here is something that cannot easily be erased. Location data from cell towers. Even if you never make a call, your phone still connects to nearby towers. That connection creates a record. Investigators can request something called a tower dump. That means they ask for a list of all devices that connected to certain towers during a specific time window. If they run a tower dump for the night of January 23rd and the night of February 1st, they can compare the lists. If 2 devices show up both nights near Nancy's house, that becomes a pattern. And patterns are powerful in court. Because coincidences can happen once, but not usually twice in the same place, at the same time, involving the same people. Now imagine this, 2 phones, both near Nancy's home on January 23rd, both near Nancy's home again on February 1st, both registered to people who know each other, people with a 19-year friendship. That would not just raise eyebrows, that would raise handcuffs. And remember, January 23rd was supposed to be invisible. If it was a rehearsal, and the suspects likely did not take precautions, they probably carried their phones like normal. They probably drove their own cars. They probably did not think anyone would ever know. But once the backward walker footage was posted, that night became important. Very important. Now let us talk about silence. After Nancy disappeared, the media surrounded Tommaso's home. Reporters waited outside. Cameras were pointed at the front door. But then something changed. According to News Nation, Tomaso stopped being seen publicly. He was not spotted at the house. He was not giving interviews. He was not appearing outside. Now there are innocent explanations. His lawyer may have told him to avoid media. He may have been overwhelmed. He may have gone somewhere private. That makes sense. But Dominic Evans has also been silent. No public statement, no interview, no social media post, no public message saying, "I hope Nancy is found." Nothing. In today's world, most people post something, even if it is small, even if it is just praying. Silence can mean many things, but silence from two people who know each other well. Silence at the same time. That can feel coordinated, like two people were given the same advice. Do not talk. Do not post. Wait. And maybe they are waiting for the same thing. The DNA results, because once those results are finalized, they will be uploaded into the national database. If there is a match, our investigators will know quickly. If there is no match, genealogy testing begins. That process looks at distant relatives, cousins, second cousins, people who used ancestry websites for fun. And from there, investigators build family trees, branch by branch, until the tree narrows to one name. It can take weeks. It can take months. But it works. It has solved cold cases decades old. And this case is fresh, which means records are cleaner. Data is easier to track. You now think about this carefully. If one of the DNA profiles belongs to someone with a past criminal record in Arizona, there is a chance their DNA was already collected. If that is true, and if there is a match, the waiting period could be short, very short. But even if there is no match in the criminal database, genealogy can still narrow it down. And if that narrowed-down name connects back to someone inside the early black circle, someone with a 19-year friendship, then the framework we discussed earlier becomes more than just a theory. It becomes structure. But there is another layer. The ransom-style emails. One message said the sender knows who the main individual is. Main individual. That phrase is strange. If there was only one kidnapper, why not just say the kidnapper? Why create a title? Titles suggest roles, hierarchy, like in a group project where one person leads and others follow. One person is the main individual, others assist, and the person writing those emails said they were gambling for his safety. That sounds like someone who feels close to danger, close enough to be afraid, close enough to know things, but not confident enough to speak openly. If there is a circle of people who know what happened that night, even if that circle is small, a pressure will test it. The reward is $200,000. That is life-changing money for many people. It can break friendships. It can break loyalty, especially if someone believes the DNA will eventually point in their direction anyway. And here is something else to consider. If two people committed this crime, trust between them must be absolute. They must trust that neither will talk, neither will panic, neither will make a mistake. But humans make mistakes. Always. Sometimes small ones. Sometimes big ones. And small mistakes leave big trails, like a glove dropped 2 miles away, like a backward walker caught on camera, like a phrase in an email that reveals more than intended. And this is where the story tightens, because everything we have talked about so far leads to one question. If there were two people, which one cracks first, the architect or the operative? And what happens when one of them realizes that silence may not save them? Because silence feels strong at first. It feels safe. If you say nothing, you cannot contradict yourself. If you say nothing, you cannot slip up. If you say nothing, there are no new clues for investigators to follow. But silence also creates pressure. Pressure builds when news vans sit outside. Pressure builds when DNA tests move forward. Pressure builds when rewards grow larger. And pressure does something to people. It makes them look at each other differently. Imagine two people sitting in separate houses, both watching the same news coverage, both hearing the words genetic genealogy, both hearing 2 DNA profiles, both knowing exactly where they were on January 23rd and February 1st. Trust is easy when everything is calm. Trust is harder when helicopters are flying overhead and agents are knocking on doors. Because every time a phone rings, you wonder, is this it? Every time a car slows near your house, you wonder, is this the moment? And if one person believes the other might break first, that doubt grows. Now let us talk about motive. Because without motive, a theory is weak. Sheriff Nanos said Nancy was targeted. That means someone chose her specifically. Why would someone choose an 84-year-old woman? There are a few possible reasons in cases like this. Money, control, personal grievance, access to something valuable. Nancy had lived in her home for decades. Homes in the Catalina foothills are valuable. Property records show ownership history. And months before Nancy disappeared, there was something else. A power of attorney document signed 8 months earlier. Power of attorney gives someone authority over another person's financial decisions. That detail alone does not prove wrongdoing. Many families use power of attorney for elderly parents. It is normal. See, but in the timeline of events, it becomes a marker. 8 months before disappearance. Then the rehearsal night. Then the drop-off. Then the abduction. When investigators build cases, they build timelines. They stack events in order. They look for changes. They look for unusual activity. They look for patterns. And sometimes, what looks normal at first becomes important later. Now think about skill sets again. Burglary teaches entry. Robbery teaches confrontation. So embezzlement teaches long-term deception. And music, oddly enough, teaches rhythm and coordination. A drummer learns timing. A drummer learns how to stay steady while others move around him. That does not make someone a criminal, but it shows discipline. Now imagine two people planning something complex. One person handles knowledge of the house. The other handles physical execution. They would need to talk in detail. Where to park, which path to take, which cameras exist, how long it takes to walk from the door to the driveway, how long before a neighbor might notice. They would need to decide who carries the backpack, who wears the holster, who disables the camera, who watches the street. These are not decisions made in panic. These are decisions made in advance. And the porch footage does not show panic. It shows control. Now, here is something else that matters. The backpack. An Ozark Trail 25-liter pack sold at Walmart. And investigators are working with Walmart to identify purchases. They are asking, how many were sold in the last 30 to 60 days? Can any be traced through payment records? Was it bought with cash, card, online? A backpack seems simple. But if it was purchased recently, it creates a paper trail. And paper trails connect to names. The holster, too. Sheriff Nanos described it as unique. Investigators are taking images to gun stores, asking owners if they recognize the model. If someone bought that holster recently, that could also leave a record. Now, step into the mind of someone who planned this. They may think, gloves prevent fingerprints, mask prevents facial recognition, backpack hides items, holster holds protection. But what about DNA? Gloves prevent leaving fingerprints, but gloves can carry your own DNA inside them. Sweat. Skin cells. If one glove was found 2 miles away, that means at some point it was discarded. Why discard it? So maybe it tore. Maybe it was no longer needed. Maybe it was thrown out the window while driving. And if there were 2 people in a vehicle, one could drive, while the other removed gloves. Small movements, small mistakes. And small mistakes are what solve big cases. Now imagine investigators overlaying data. Tower dumps, DNA, purchase records, traffic cameras, license plate readers. They do not need a confession. They need connections. And connections build a web. But a web is hard to escape once you are caught in it. But there is still something we have not fully addressed. The human side. Nancy Guthrie is not just a case. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman who lived in the same house for 40 years. Savannah Guthrie has posted videos begging for her mother's return. She speaks directly to whoever took Nancy. She says, "It is never too late to do the right thing." Those words are not for strangers. Oh, they are for someone who might still be watching. Someone who might still have a choice. If 2 people committed this crime, one of them may feel differently now than they did that night. Regret can grow. Fear can grow. Especially when weeks pass. 23 days. Then more. Time changes how people feel. At first, adrenaline is strong. Later, silence is heavy. Now, let us look at the bigger risk. If investigators move this case into a smaller long-term task force, public pressure may decrease. Fewer cameras, fewer headlines, but DNA does not forget. Cell data does not forget. Records do not disappear. And people who feel safe when cameras leave may relax. They may travel. They may use devices more freely. They may talk. And sometimes, when suspects think attention has faded, that is when they slip. Now ask yourself something simple. If you were innocent and your name was being connected online to a missing elderly woman, what would you do? Would you speak out? Would you deny it loudly? Would you express sympathy publicly? Or would you stay silent? There is no single correct answer, but behavior matters. And investigators study behavior carefully, not emotions, patterns, consistency. Now, let us return to the phrase from the ransom emails. The main individual. That phrase suggests organization. If there is a main individual, there are others. And if there are others, those others may feel less protected, and less secure. They may believe they are more exposed. And exposure creates fear. Fear makes people unpredictable. Now think about the 19-year friendship. 19 years is a long time. But even long friendships can fracture under pressure. Money can test loyalty. Fear can test loyalty. And DNA is a powerful test. Because DNA does not lie. It does not forget. It does not care about stories. It matches or it does not. And when it matches, doors open. Real doors. With badges. He with warrants. With agents asking questions that are very hard to answer calmly. So the question becomes, if the DNA comes back linked to someone in that inner circle, what happens next? And who makes the first move before that happens? Because once the first move is made, everything changes. If one person decides to speak first, they gain something powerful, control of the story. In many cases, the first person to cooperate gets the better deal. That is how the system works. But prosecutors reward information. They reward honesty. They reward the person who breaks the silence. So imagine two people who may know what happened, both aware of that rule, both aware that if the other speaks first, everything shifts. That kind of tension is quiet, but it is strong. Now let us look at something that has not been talked about enough. Time. From 9:30 p.m., when Nancy was dropped off, to around 1:30 or 2 a.m., when the suspect appears, there is a 4-hour window. 4 hours is a long time. Long enough for someone to return home. Long enough for phone calls. Long enough for planning. Long enough for coordination. If this crime was spontaneous, that 4-hour gap makes less sense. But if it was planned, that gap could be the preparation window. The window where someone leaves their house, meets another person, switches vehicles, changes clothing, puts on gloves, puts on a mask, and drives back under the cover of darkness. Yet now think about neighborhood cameras. Tucson neighborhoods have ring cameras, driveway cameras, street cameras, license plate readers in some areas. To avoid being identified, someone would need to think carefully about approach routes. Which streets have fewer cameras? Which exits are darker? Where can a car be parked without being recorded clearly? That requires local knowledge. Knowledge of the area. Knowledge that comes from living there. Driving there often. Now imagine the drive south, from Catalina foothills toward rural land. Rio Rico sits about 60 miles south of Tucson. Near the border, remote, wide-open desert, few houses, long dirt roads. At 2:30 in the morning, that drive is quiet, dark, empty. If someone needed isolation, that area provides it. Again, there is no confirmed evidence Nancy was taken there. But when investigators think about where someone could disappear a person without witnesses, they look at maps like that. Remote zones, sparse population, minimal cameras, and if someone connected to the case has ties to such an area, that becomes part of the larger picture. Now let us step into the investigative room. Agents sitting at tables, walls covered with maps, photos of Nancy, still images from the porch footage, lists of cell towers, names of people connected to the family, timelines printed in order. January 23rd, January 31st, February 1st, February 9th, February 13th. Said every date matters, every movement matters. They do not look at one clue alone. They layer them. DNA on the glove. DNA inside the house. Cell tower records. Purchase records from Walmart. Holster sales. Gun store logs. Traffic footage. Bank records. Power of attorney documents. Friendship histories. Criminal backgrounds. They look at everything. Because crimes like this are not solved by one clue. They are solved by connection. And connection is where the accomplice theory becomes important. If two DNA profiles exist, investigators are not just searching for one identity. They are searching for two. And if one is identified first, that person becomes leverage. Because once you identify one individual, you can pressure them. You can confront them with evidence. You can ask about the second profile. You can ask about phone records. You can ask about January 23rd. And sometimes, when confronted with data, people talk. Now, let us imagine something else. What if one DNA profile belongs to someone not previously in the spotlight? Someone whose name has not been mentioned online? Someone outside the early black circle? If that happens, the entire framework shifts. Because good investigations must be ready to pivot. The architect and operative model is a tool. If evidence contradicts it, it must be abandoned. That is how honest inquiry works. But if the evidence aligns with it, if names begin to match relationships, then that model becomes the backbone of the case. Now consider Savannah's public pleas again. She speaks directly to the person who took her mother. She says it is not too late. That message is not just emotional. It is strategic. It plants doubt in the mind of anyone involved. It tells them there is still a path to mercy. And mercy can be tempting when fear grows. Especially if you are not the main individual. Especially if you feel like you were pulled into something. If someone feels secondary. If someone feels less protected. If someone believes the main planner may try to shift blame. That person may decide to step forward. Now we return to the height issue. The detail that started this entire expansion. 5'9" to 5'10". Average build. Facial hair. That description did not fit Tomaso perfectly, but it does not exclude Dominic. And if the DNA from the glove matches someone of that height range, then the height problem disappears. Not because the theory forced it away, but because evidence resolved it. And if the DNA does not match anyone in that circle, then the theory weakens, and that is important. Because in true investigations, strength and weakness must both be acknowledged. Now let us look at human nature. When two people share a secret this big, and they must communicate carefully, maybe they avoid texting, maybe they avoid calls, maybe they meet in person. But even meeting in person creates risk. Neighbors notice, traffic cameras notice. Phones connect to towers even if not used. Modern life leaves trails. Very few people can truly disappear without leaving one. And whoever planned this knew enough to wear gloves, to wear a mask, to tap the camera. That suggests awareness. But awareness is not perfection, because perfection is rare. Even professionals make mistakes. And here, there were at least two mistakes. The rehearsal footage and the dropped glove. Small things. But small things can unravel large plans. Now imagine investigators waiting for the genealogy lab to finish analysis. Each day passing. Each day closer to a name. When that name appears, everything speeds up. Interviews, search warrants, seizures of devices, digital forensics, financial reviews. And if two people are involved, investigators can compare stories. They can test them against each other. Consistency becomes crucial. If timelines do not match, cracks appear. If phone data contradicts statements, cracks widen. And cracks eventually break walls. So here is where the story tightens even more. Because we are standing at a point in time where nothing is publicly confirmed, but multiple paths are closing in. DNA path, cell tower path, purchase record path, a behavioral path. And when multiple paths converge on the same individuals, that is when cases change from questions to charges. But we are not there yet. We are in the waiting phase, the most dangerous phase for anyone hiding something. Because waiting gives time to think. And thinking can lead to doubt. And doubt can lead to mistakes. Now imagine one more scenario. What if the DNA from inside the house belongs to someone close to Nancy? Someone who had legitimate access. And the glove DNA belongs to someone else entirely? That would complicate everything, because it would mean inside access and outside execution, which again supports coordination, but also opens more questions, and that is why investigators are careful. They do not rush. They confirm. They cross-check. They build slowly, because when they act, they must be certain. Now we return once more to the 19-year friendship. 19 years of shared history, music rehearsals, recording sessions, late nights, shared jokes, shared struggles. If two people bonded that long, breaking that bond under pressure would not be easy. But it is not impossible, especially when fear of prison becomes real, and when the possibility of being the secondary player becomes frightening. Because secondary players often receive harsher sentences if they stay silent, but they can receive reduced ones if they cooperate. Oh, and anyone who understands that might start to weigh options. Stay loyal, or save yourself. That decision point is where this story may soon move. And the moment one person decides to protect themselves first, everything changes. Because once one person chooses to protect themselves, the silence breaks. And when silence breaks, truth moves fast. Imagine a quiet interview room, a table, 2 chairs, a recorder. An investigator lays out papers, cell tower records, DNA reports, unpurchased logs, maps. The person across the table sees their own movements printed in black and white. Dates, times, locations. The investigator does not shout. They do not threaten. They simply say, "Help us understand." And in that moment, loyalty feels different. Because loyalty may mean taking the full weight alone, while cooperation may mean sharing it. Now step back. What do we truly know? Nancy Guthrie was targeted. 2 DNA profiles exist. A rehearsal may have happened 8 days earlier. A man the height described by the FBI walked up to her door calmly. A glove was found 2 miles away. Ransom-style emails used the phrase main individual. A long friendship connects 2 men to the victim's family. Those are facts, not opinions, not guesses. Facts. What we do not know yet is whose DNA is on that glove, whose DNA was found inside the house, what phones were near the scene on both January 23rd and February 1st. Who bought the backpack? Who bought the holster? Those answers are coming. And when they come, they will either strengthen the framework we have discussed or tear it apart. If the DNA points outside the early black circle, then the theory shifts. If it points inside, then the questions grow sharper. But here is something important. The goal is not to be right about a theory. The goal is to find Nancy, to understand what happened, to bring truth to a family that wakes up every day not knowing. And sometimes Truth arrives quietly, not in a dramatic arrest on television, but in paperwork, in lab results, in digital records, in a knock at a door before sunrise. The reward is now $200,000. That number sits like a weight in the minds of anyone who knows more than they are saying. Money changes calculations. Fear changes calculations. Time changes calculations. And if two people share a secret, time is their enemy. Because secrets grow heavier. And heavy secrets eventually crack. So here is where we stand. The height discrepancy that once looked like the end of a theory now looks like the beginning of a bigger one. The two DNA profiles tell us this was not likely the act of one person alone. The rehearsal footage tells us this may have been planned. The ransom language hints at layers. The geography shows proximity. The friendship shows trust. The skill sets show capability. But evidence will decide. Not emotion, not online debates, not speculation. The DNA will speak. The cell towers will speak. The purchase records will speak. And when they do, the story will become clear. Until then, Nancy Guthrie remains missing. She is not a headline. She is not a theory. She is a human being who deserves answers. Somewhere, someone knows what happened on the night of January 31st. Maybe two people know. Maybe more. But truth does not stay hidden forever. It waits. It gathers strength. And when the right piece falls into place, everything shifts. When that moment comes, we will not be guessing anymore. We will be looking at facts. And those facts will either confirm the architect and operative model, or show us a path we did not see before. But one way or another, the waiting will end. And when it does, the silence that has surrounded this case will finally break. Nancy Guthrie's story is not finished. It is paused. And the next update, when the DNA results are made public, may change everything.